Welcome to the Workplace Ninja Netherlands podcast, a series on Microsoft's modern workplace management.
Hi, there are we again with a new podcast in the workplace management series of the Workplace Ninja podcast. We are at a new place. Today we're in Gorinchem, one of the places in the Netherlands, in the boardroom of one of the companies allocated by Erik. So Erik, thanks for having us in this nice room to have a new recording. And today we are managing a new topic. Joost, what topic?
All about the settings catalog.
The settings catalog, yeah. So managing workplaces in Intune, we started with the configuration autopilot. We have talked about the basic policies. We have talked about the security baselines. And I need to remove the audio from my Windows device because that is also recorded in this podcast. So I need to take that out.
You are a busy man, Frans, being boarded during recording our podcast. So cool.
Yeah, but as you can see, if you are watching on YouTube, you can see us. And we have Sander as a new guest, one of the participants in our podcast, and Sander is joined remotely, so also talking in this podcast. So Sander, welcome as a new member of the Workplace Ninja family.
Yeah, thank you.
What are you doing in your normal day job?
Well, normally I work on an automation platform for managing Azure platforms as Microsoft 365 platforms, Intune, that kind of stuff. And I'm responsible for all the automation what is going through the platform. So we're building templates for the Azure part, but also configuration profiles, JSON files, and enrollment pipelines for the Intune and M365 site.
I think.
Also built it. Yeah,
I think I got a new topic for one of the next recordings, Joost. Automation and workplace management. Probably we can add that one to the agenda as well.
It's a wide topic, so you can definitely fill some podcasts with that.
So let's add that to that one. Today we're talking about the settings catalog. So thanks for your introduction, Sander, and happy to join us. And let's see if we can add each other next time also. Settings catalog, Joost, what is it? We talked a little bit in the previous ones, but
I think a lot, every time. What is it? You can say it's a collection of settings. A new way of setting settings into the Intune portal, better way for everyone. But better, we can start. What kind of settings do we have? We got Admix, we've got Omayuris, other ones as well, and those are all being collected into the settings catalog.
Yeah, more or less. I think in the previous recording we talked about it as well. What is the preferred place to configure stuff? The most preferred way is the settings catalog. That was what we have discussed already. Is that what it is, Kenneth?
Indeed. So the settings catalog is the latest addition as a way to manage the configurations on the endpoint. And therefore, the preferred solution, if you start building new configuration today, the preferred option is to start using the settings catalog. And as Joost already mentioned, there are other ways to do the same as well. And maybe that's a good discussion point on how to transition from old configuration methods towards the new settings catalog methods, and how we can accomplish that.
Yeah, but first, what is in the settings catalog? What's in it? Is that all type of configurations. We already talked also about the endpoint security. So the security settings have a preferred location on the endpoint security.
Yeah.
What are the other configuration parts that can be handled with the settings catalog?
Well, the basic idea of the settings catalog is that actually all configurable settings are in the settings catalog. So I'm not saying that it's 100% filling of all the possible settings, because sometimes new settings arise and you still have to use the OMI URI to set them. But they come quite near all the possible options that we have. And another interesting part is that it will also be uniform across platforms. So we now also have settings catalog for macOS management, for example, therefore making it easier to manage multiple platforms using the same technology.
Yeah, and so it's basically for Windows at the moment. macOS has already been added, and that will be expanded within the configurations that will be available on that. Will this also be available for Android and iOS as well, and Linux probably later on?
I can imagine that will be added. So we don't have that support yet, but it's expected that if they want to uniformize on the settings catalog, that in the near future we can see that happening as well. Yeah.
So for now, the settings are there for iOS, iPadOS, Windows OS, and macOS. So that's
iOS, it's already a few configurations are there as well. Okay. Joost, you talked a few minutes ago. You talked about ADMX files. Is it possible to convert ADMX files into the settings catalog? Is there?
Yeah, it's not.
Is that the way we want to work?
It's not a conversion process, but you can create them as you like. Before like the ADMX files as well. So. That's more easier. It's easier to find those settings, but that's more into how do you use the settings catalog. But probably it's also good to mention something what's not in the settings catalog, because what they told us is that all the settings are there, but not for the specific UX files. So when there is a certificate file needed to create, it's not there. But what I've seen last week is that when you're trying to search it, you're going to be helped to get to the right connections and right catalog files where you have to set those cap files. So they're going to help you set those settings.
Okay, it's more or less, and please help me if I am understanding that wrong, the settings catalog, it's more than only a single configuration item, but it's also giving you, as an IT admin, it's giving you more information about how and why you should use that. Yeah,
because the help is in there as well. You're going to be helped to those settings as well. If it's not there, you're going to be provided with a link to the right configuration as well.
Okay. Talking about conversion, migrating current situations into settings catalog, into configuration of Intune. We talked already a little bit about that one. Don't make a conversion and take it one-on-one. But how to handle that, Kenneth? Is there? What was the approach?
Yeah, well, the approach is to take it step by step, to say so. And there's not really an approach here because the old methods still work. But my suggestion would be that if you have to create a new configuration, use it and start using the settings catalog. And and take actually transforming some of the most easy settings, transform them to the settings catalog equivalent if possible. In the end, and it's a little bit depending on how you manage your environment, but in the end, all my settings will be settings catalog if possible, of course. But again, it's not like Microsoft already announced that certain things are not going to work anymore if you're still using the administrative templates or the specific old configuration items taking place. But maybe it's also a good question to ask Sander on from an automation perspective what he prefers.
Well, that's a good question because I'm always struggling with that part because you can use the old-fashioned way with ADMX, and when using that option, you get a custom ADMX object into your Intune environment. That also works quite well. From an automation perspective, it's a bit more easier to use the settings catalog on because you have one endpoint to talk against to. The information which you need to provide is always the same because the settings catalog is built in the same way every time. Where the ADMX file is differs all the time because you have to deal with different settings. One disadvantage, I think, it's not disadvantage, but it's making it a bit complex, is that every setting in the settings catalog has its own specific ID, and of course it's needed, but those IDs are not documented very well. So if you want to build a good profile based on the settings catalog. It's a big labyrinth of IDs, settings, and it's not categorized on based on specific subject or so. So there's a quite long list with all the different IDs and their settings in it.
Sander,
but on the other side,
are there that sort of IDs? Are they changing as well? Because if there is an update on the settings catalog, I can imagine that some sort of IDs can be changed afterwards.
Yes, I must say I haven't experienced with that changes on this moment. What I mean with IDs is it's not a number or so. It's a long string that tells what setting it is. So it's all lowercase, filled with underscores.
Okay.
So based on ID, you can guess a bit what the setting is doing.
And
so
it's not foreseeable that changes that there are changes on that ID. So if you have making a script with IDs in half year ago or a year ago, and in about 2 years you want to reuse that should be possible in your opinion.
Yeah, I think it's possible because our Microsoft has changed also the category or the main category, or maybe the description for that particular setting. Then yes, maybe it can change. But for now, I must say the settings catalog is quite new, so I haven't seen many changes from version 1 to version 2. The only thing I see right now is Microsoft is creating a longer list, but not changing the IDs and their settings on it. So for now, what I've done is I crawled through the whole settings catalog, so I get all the IDs and all the settings, and from there I built my own templates and configuration for profiles.
Yeah, because
yes, you have to work with it a lot to understand a bit what is going on underwater.
Well, one other disadvantage, or maybe a disadvantage, is it's depending on how you see it. But take, for example, today, we did see that Microsoft released a new update for Edge, which actually introduces a new Bing icon in your Edge browser. And actually, the first things that people start communicating is, hey, how can I disable this? Because I don't want this for my users. And the only option to disable it at the moment is by providing a registry key. Within the world of GPO, GPP, we can actually easily provision that. But there is no settings catalog file for that yet. We can expect that to appear in the future, but it's not like the settings catalog currently is updated real time with new settings being available.
Yeah, talking about a disadvantage. If there is something new, you have to do it with a NOMA URI or something else. Later on, that will be captured into the settings catalog or in endpoint security or whatever.
Yeah.
And so there is a continuous look into the environment to see if things moving into the settings catalog, so you can enhance your configuration profiles. That's what you say.
Yeah, indeed. So.
Yeah, I think it's not a disadvantage from my side, and not specific on the automation side, but the settings catalog is also a bit a dangerous thing, because you can, it's called a catalog, so you can put a lot of settings into the into one configuration profile. That also can, you can also create a situation that you have a lot of settings into one configuration profile. And if I would create a configuration profile, I want to create a profile based on a specific context or based on a specific for power settings, for example. Then I will create a power settings configuration profile specific only for power settings.
Yeah.
And so if I want to create another configuration thing, which is not power settings but the start menu, for example, then I will create a separate start menu profile. Yes, the settings catalog supports both contexts into one single profile setting, but I think you can lose a site very quick. So from that side, it doesn't really matter if you're using custom ADMX files with the specific edge setting or related to the settings catalog.
Yeah, there's one thing I want to add there, and that I think that's important, because if you're using the ADMX ingestion, actually the ADMX will actually set the GPO keys. And those are different actually from the settings coming from the MDM side. We had a discussion last week about many security vendors having their toolkits doing security assessments on workplaces, where actually those toolkits look at the GPO settings of a device. Therefore actually flagging a lot of modern workplaces as being insecure, while they are actually, their tooling is not looking in the right location. Yeah. And that's quite challenging, because we have to talk with the security vendors that they need to adopt their security tooling, not only to look at the GPO locations of settings, but also have a look at the registry locations where actually the CSP settings are being stored.
On the other hand, this is one thing, and I want to bring another topic related to that on the table. If I have 100 or 1,000 configuration profiles, what does that with the performance related to an endpoint? Because in the past, it was so that less configuration profiles makes the configuration on an endpoint much more faster than if you have a lot of configuration profiles with SCCM, for example. How does that feel within Intune based on this conversation?
Well, there will probably be some limits on the amount of settings or configuration profiles that you can set. But if you actually do a more deep dive, eventually when the settings are being synced to the device using the SyncML protocol, they are actually being provisioned in the registry. But it's not like that for every setting there's a different registry location. They are all merged in certain locations. So, and from there, actually, the client picks up all the settings which need to be set. So I think from that perspective, there will not be a performance penalty. On the other hand, it's always finding the right balance between building in granularity, as Sander explained, specific settings for power settings, specific for the start menu configuration, etc. But not that much that you don't have any oversight anymore. So you have to find the optimal balance for yourself in that case.
Well, I think from if you talk about performance and, for example, you have 100,000 rules in configuration profiles, I think it's more a performance boost to use filters besides AD groups, for example.
Yeah.
Because for every rule you are implementing for a specific group, the Intune has to crawl a group in AD every time. And when you're using filters, it's a kind of virtual group with all the assets Intune has, and it's always searching on the same asset group, which is all devices, for example, and then it filters just the devices which you need to deploy to.
Yeah.
So it really saves Intune crawling the Azure AD for all the time.
So,
rule.
So pro tip, if you are using configuration profiles within Intune, you have a lot of it targeted to all users or all devices, and then put filters on that configuration profile so Intune can handle that, and that's much faster than if you are using AD groups on that.
Yeah,
Exactly.
what we see especially, and that's something I experienced in the last couple of weeks, so that actually the group calculation of Azure AD dynamic groups takes a really long time. And if you also look in the Azure AD portal, it's stated there that it can take up to 24 hours.
Yeah.
Well, Microsoft is meeting those 24 hours, don't get me wrong, but if you build your whole deployment strategy based on the calculation of dynamic groups, I think, things can break.
Yeah. Are there other things to say about the settings catalog?
Yes, I want to add something.
You're not in the conversation
Yeah,
already.
I'm not an expert on session catalog, but I think I have some knowledge about how to manage more than one tenant.
Yeah.
So the biggest problem with the session catalog, just another method of configuration in Intune. Yeah, if you look at the way we do, we have a golden template. We use it for more than 100 tenants. And if you want to change something, then if you are using different methods to each other, it's going to become hard to troubleshoot. We say, okay, we keep on using configuration profiles, and we make a new golden tenant, version 2, so we have version 1 managed customers and version 2, and we do a migration, full migration. It's not it's a step, also step by step, but that is on the customer base. Eerst the easy peasy customers, then the hard ones. But just a new thing, introducing the new, you have to, it's hard work if you want to have golden templates and everything the same on every customer. And then mix and match is not a good idea. You get troubleshooting problems, and it's unclear for the service desk. What's happening here is now a session catalog that's new. So new template, new customers, and migrate step-by-step customer full to the session catalog. That's our way of working, because we have multiple tenants using same configuration. So baseline version 1, baseline version 2. That's the way we do it. So
yeah, there's a different approach. If you are the large customer, you have to do it in your own tenant, and you can migrate from configuration profiles into settings catalog. If you have an MSP, what Proxys is, for example, then you have a lot of customers using configuration profiles. You have a golden tenant, and what you say, you don't have to mix and match in your golden tenant, because that gives probably issues not directly on the configuration, but also on the support that you want to deliver on that.
yes, and also you mix and match why it doesn't work. First thing you look, oh, that's new. So one piece of configuration, do it on that piece, and then make a golden template version 2 and apply that to new customers, and then you move all customers from baseline version 1 to version 2 like a mini project. And that can be automated, of course.
Of course.
Yeah, actually that's a good approach, because we will probably it will probably not end with the settings catalog. So maybe in 2-3 years there will be a settings catalog v2, or they will call it modern management. I don't really care, but we need to keep we need to acknowledge that most probably change will be part of a whole Microsoft 365 implementation, and that we need to continuously evolve together with the settings that Microsoft is providing and the ways of doing that configuration as well. And if you don't, then you actually risk that Microsoft starts to not support certain settings. And the last thing that you want is that your customers are impacted by that. So you need to move as well. And of course, there's some time available for you to do that transition. And that is actually why I'm also mentioning, so if you start creating new configuration today, I would prefer to use the settings catalog and don't start using an administrative template anymore. But that's just because from a life cycle management point of view, it will last the longest, to say so.
Yeah, there are differences between endpoint security and the settings catalog doing the same stuff. When I look at the settings picker within the settings catalog, there are also configuration items like Defender Security Center, Hello for Business, and all the security stuff that we cannot configure that also from the endpoint security. That's the most preferred way because of role-based access, for example. How to deal with that? Because it is on multiple places. Why doesn't Microsoft remove that from the settings catalog, for example?
Well, maybe a good question to ask to Sander as well. Sander, for example, if you have like a firewall settings, do you prefer to set that in a configuration profile or under endpoint security within a firewall profile?
Ooh, that's a good one.
From an automation perspective, does it matter where you configure it?
No, actually it doesn't matter because in the end, if you look into the Graph API, for example, it's also a different endpoint where you are automating to.
Okay.
So you're building a JSON file that handles that has the configuration in it. And the only thing you have to do is send a JSON file to a particular a Graph API endpoint.
Yeah.
So from an automation perspective, it doesn't matter. If you look at the into the Intune portal itself, it's just another place into the portal.
Okay.
But if you look underwater, it's always a different endpoint, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, so, but from your experience, are there more settings in the settings catalog based on a certain scenario compared to what under endpoint security, or you don't see any difference there as well?
No, yeah, there are really differences. The most things I'd always try with the settings catalog at first, and if the setting is not there, then I use the security endpoint.
Okay. Yeah.
I will say I won't be surprised that Microsoft will be migrating the whole all the settings into a catalog in the future, but yeah, we will see. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. So to add what I know about that is because that all the security settings are actually isolated from the normal configuration, mainly because of our role-based access control as well. So you can have like a security team in charge of all the security settings, and actually have a desktop management team doing the desktop settings. But what Sander mentions is actually quite interesting, though, that in the end it's the same settings that you
but
deploy.
What happened if I set a certain policy, a certain setting within endpoint security, like BitLocker, for example, or
I know where you're going through,
or what else? I have configured that as well in the settings catalog, and I've also done an OMA URI or a config policy.
Then you have a conflict.
You have a conflict, but you have a conflict. But what will be active?
I think in the case of a conflict where all the conflict is within Config Manager, you never know.
Yeah, and I'm looking in the.
There's no precedence
Is there preference?
There is no preference.
No.
The only preference setting that you have is that you can actually prefer MDM settings over GPO, but within the CSP, you cannot say, hey, this policy has more preference than the other one. Would be a nice feature to have. On the other hand, it will, of course, also force you to be very knowledgeable about what settings you set from where. So
yeah, but the security. Sorry, I interrupt you, Kenneth. The security. If you go to Endpoint Security in the Intune portal, it's just a name. It's just a visual into the portal itself. It's just an HTML thing you see. When you click on it, when you go to the Endpoint Security, related to the configuration profile, in the end, you're always going to the device configuration endpoint underwater.
yeah.
So it doesn't matter which one you're using. It's just the way of going into it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and maybe separating the responsibility between
Yeah, I think,
security-related people and desktop management.
Two things on that. First, it's role-based access because when you look into the endpoint manager roles, there is a endpoint security manager role, and the description on that is assign administrators to endpoint manager roles, create and configure custom endpoint managers. So the settings within endpoint security, that's the only thing an endpoint security manager can handle. So if you are a large organization, you have a SecOps team and you have your workplace management team. Workplace management is doing all the stuff in Intune, but you can delegate the management of endpoint security to SecOps team, for example. And that is the
that's a quite interesting thing you say, because you're triggering me right now. Because from an automation perspective, there could be a security breach because when you go into the configuration profile settings, if you have the just API permissions for policy read all, for example, then it doesn't matter if you're reading security profiles or configuration profiles. It's all the same endpoints with the same permissions.
Interesting.
Yeah.
But maybe something to further discuss when doing the automation topic later on. Yeah.
Maybe investigate some of these and get some questions to one of the PMs and see if we can elaborate a little bit on that. The other thing I want to mention, I think I forget it. In the meantime, you were mentioning role-based access, and the other thing was. I don't get them. So we have to.
I forgot as well.
Yeah, we have to listen back and see if we can get that.
Yeah.
I know it already. If I have a specific setting on the configuration profile on a settings catalog, probably if it's the same underlying registry key, for example, or what else, the first thing that is set. And if that's a configuration profile, because I have set that a year ago, for example, that setting will be active on an endpoint. If I do, in addition to that, a settings catalog configuration or an endpoint security configuration, then we have a conflict in Intune. You see, you can see that. Probably we can. I think there's a
caller.
There is a caller.
Who is calling?
France.
Oh.
I don't know if that's on my end, but
no problem. Continue, Frans.
If that's the settings catalog, and that's configured afterwards, there's a conflict. Probably Intune, and I don't know. That's a question. If there's a conflict, probably Intune doesn't set that in the sync, and it will be set on the endpoint.
Yeah, to be honest, I don't know the answer, but as you said, there can be several scenarios. For example, that the first who comes with the setting wins. Can also be the last with the setting who comes wins. But we also don't have any control in which order the settings are being placed. So it could be that with sync 1 it's the setting of configuration profile A, and with sync 3 is the setting of configuration profile B. In the end, we should build something preventing the whole conflict part. In my opinion, if you have a well thought of tenant, you could go to any device, look at the configuration, and you should only see success for every configuration profile, or at least have like profiles which are not applicable because they don't meet a filter or something. But you can never have errors and never have conflicts.
Erik, if you are migrating some smaller customers from one tenant to another, the first golden tenant to your second one with the new configuration, are you running into conflicts as well?
Now at the moment we are not having a golden template version 2, but we are investigating that because it's not. It's really hard to manage that, to make it in our DevOps pipelines and all that kind of stuff, the second template. And so it's really difficult. But where we might, if what we want is refresh the tenant. So delete all configuration profiles and add them all new. So that's our way of working, and that's a complicated way. But that make it really clear. It's now based on X. That's the way we configure it. And so what we normally do is we have a baseline version 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023. And that baseline we have a quarterly release. But we keep on releasing, keep that up to date for 3 years, 4 years, it depends. And then we have a new template with new bases, and then we do a migration project that sometimes it's just a day. It doesn't have to be a big project, but to convince the customer, and we add also then new features which are not in that base template. So we don't. So we do an always up to date thing, but with big changes we do only every day. Someone comes in here. I have a good idea. Okay, that's for the new baseline and not for the current baseline. Yeah. Except, for example, MFA number matching, which will be updated in all the baselines. So there are exceptions, but that's our way of working. So we do. So we are not. There's also an individual customer part, and we have small customers, and it's for me it will be a nightmare. Sander said I have 1,000 profiles. That's for me unmanageable. So I want to keep it as clean as possible. So that's also the way of working. So conflicts, yes, but we do it on a manual basis, migrating, or maybe the configuration is automated. But then you have to go to the customer. The soft skill guy is going and then looks what happened or just the exception. So that's our way of working. And it's not good or bad, but that's our way of working.
In my opinion, this is what makes the product interesting. So we have the same products used by many companies, but actually the way you operate your company or the way that you are doing your work heavily depends on how you actually make use of the product. And there having options and choices is actually a good idea. And based on Erik, his scenarios, I can imagine that you want to keep it simple, maybe have as less as possible configuration profiles. While on the other hand, when looking at the example of Sander, which I use as well, if you want to start working exception-based, you want to make sure that if you make an exception, that the exception is as minimal as possible, for example, for the power settings. So choices are only good, and as long as those choices are there, I think we, as IT consultants, will still have a lot of work to do at customers.
Absolutely. Yeah, what's for me also an interesting subject is the conflict part in relation to monitoring, but a way to monitor if a policy is in a conflict state or not. Actually, you want to have an alert or something in your monitoring environment, in email, in MS Teams, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But you also want to know if a particular policy is in a conflict state. And that's the thing which is really missing on Intune right now.
Yeah, what we see happening is that people are really good in creating configuration, but they sometimes forget to validate whether that configuration lands properly on their endpoints. And that's actually where the whole monitoring comes in. And I think we have a new topic for maybe a new podcast as well here, Sander. Yeah.
Yeah, I've played with it with custom logs from using the REST API of the Graph API, and then using the log analytics to send custom events from out of Intune, for example,
Yeah, cool.
which is not monitored from that part. Well, I'm giving that session on the community day on April 16 in the Netherlands. So a little shout out for that one.
Yeah,
But,
cool.
Let's be invited for
Yeah,
that.
cool.
Yeah.
Okay. We talked about settings catalog, how we can manage that, how we can add users to that, do some filtering on that preferred way of working. Did we miss something, Joost?
Maybe some tips and tricks how to search into the settings catalog, but
Yeah,
I don't know if someone has one. I've got one, but
so let's see if we can enable Kenneth's Corner on that.
Yeah,
yeah.
awesome.
Kenneth's.
Kenneth, to finish up, do you have some tips and tricks on this topic?
Yeah, I do. If you use the settings catalog, you can actually use filtering. And you can either filter on platform, for example, filter only the settings which are, for example, applicable to a HoloLens device, which you can manage with Intune as well. Might be an interesting topic for future, by the way.
The HoloLens?
The HoloLens, managing it, yeah. So, yeah, why not? Hey, but the other interesting one is that you can actually filter on whether a setting is applicable to user or device. And that's mainly interesting because, in my experience, everyone working with Endpoint Manager or Intune, as we may call it again now, is actually struggling on whether to assign to users or devices. So why not use the settings catalog filtering to help you determine whether you want to assign to devices or to users? And I'm not saying that you should make that distinct, but it can help you to determine where a setting is applicable to. And I think especially the filtering can become very helpful in the future as well, because filtering is endlessly. Maybe we can use all kinds of filters to make it more easy to start using the settings catalog, because in the end the settings catalog today contains thousands and thousands of settings. So you have no idea what to choose.
So filtering based on users and groups, we talked about that, but also filtering within the settings catalog.
Yeah, so what I mean is you can filter on settings which are applicable to devices and settings which are applicable to users.
Yeah.
Comparable to how we did that with group policies. We had user group policies and device group policies. While today, for example, in the settings, in the security baseline, you have all kinds of settings, but some settings are applicable to users, the other ones are applicable to devices. Sometimes that can lead to conflicts. For example, when a user setting, for example, your desktop background is set on a machine, you actually get an error because the machine doesn't have a desktop, the system account. So that will actually circumvent all those kinds of issues. So start using the filters. And maybe it will help you to make better choices on what settings catalog items to start using.
Okay, Joost, you had another one.
Yeah. When searching and you cannot find the setting, please try the CSP naming convention in it, because then suddenly things happen and it's coming right into your screens as well. Sometimes better to check those ones as well, because sometimes the spaces and everything into your settings are a little bit complicated to find.
Sander, from automation perspective, any tips on how to find the correct setting fast?
Well, what I use sometimes is, sometimes very often actually, is using the F12 button on your keyboard that shows your developer screen in your browser. And when you're creating a profile manually, then it shows on the development screen which settings are configured and which request is sent to the Intune platform.
Yeah.
From that part, you can really simple extract the JSON body to get the correct settings.
Cool. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, any other? Because my battery is running out of power, so probably otherwise we will disconnect it. Everything. So
I think we can wrap up. Huh?
Yes, wrap it up. It's too much sounds from your system, I think.
Yeah.
yeah, also too much sounds. Teams was on, and no, what is it? The do not disturb mode was not on. So we have a few ticks in this recording, but that may not happen. We have a party over here, so quite good. To wrap it up, settings catalog, automation. Let's see if we can have another recording specific over automation. Probably some on monitoring. We will add that into our series. Next time, we're talking about conditional access, I guess.
Cool.
That will be a very
cool.
very specific topic where we can talk hours about, I think. So please be aware of that, of what's coming. Thanks for listening now. Thanks for being on the table here, the guys. And let's see each other next time. Thank you.